I get ickier scrolling through endless options, trying to decide if a 32-inch commercial convection oven is worth the countertop real estate and the extra plug. You've probably heard the hype about restaurant-grade ovens, but you also know how easy it is to end up with a piece of equipment that just sits there, gathering dust, while you waste money on a kitchen gadget that doesn't match your real needs. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about why a countertop convection oven even belongs in a home kitchen or a small business space. The idea behind these units is simple: give you the ability to bake, roast, and reheat multiple dishes at once without having to wait for a single rack to finish. In a commercial setting, that means higher output and shorter turnaround. For a serious home baker, it translates into the freedom to bake 2 batches of cookies while a lasagna finishes on another rack, all with the same consistent heat. The KoolMore 32-inch model tries to bring that flexibility to a countertop, and that's where the conversation gets interesting. Who should actually consider this oven? If you run a food truck, a pop-up CAF, or a catering operation that needs to produce several trays of food in a tight schedule, the extra racks and the ability to handle full-size pans are pure gold. The same applies to avid home cooks who routinely work with multiple dishes. Think holiday feasts where you need a turkey, sides, and a dessert all cooking at once. The oven's 35004600W of power means it can maintain a steady temperature even when you load it up, which is exactly the kind of reliability you need when you're feeding a crowd. On the flip side, if you're living in a studio apartment, or your kitchen counter is already a battlefield of gadgets, this might be more machine than you can reasonably use. The unit is built for a 240V outlet, which most typical residential kitchens don't have without a dedicated circuit. Installing that kind of power can add an extra cost and a bit of hassle, something a casual weekend baker might not want to deal with. Also, the stainless steel frame, while looking sleek, adds a few £100, so you'll need a sturdy counter and a clear path for moving it in and out. Let's dive into the practical strengths that actually matter day to day. The most obvious win is the interior size. With 4 removable racks, you can line up a full-size sheet pan of cookies, a roasting pan for a chicken, a casserole dish, and a pizza stone all at once. In a test kitchen scenario, that means you could start a batch of brownies, pop a tray of roasted vegetables on the second rack, and have a pre-made pizza baking on the third, all while the fourth rack holds a warming tray for finished dishes. The even heating that comes from the high wattage means you won't get the dreaded hot spots that sometimes plague smaller countertop ovens, so you can trust that a batch of cookies won't come out burnt on one side and undercooked on the other. The stainless steel housing isn't just for aesthetics, it gives the oven a durability that cheap enamel models lack. If you're in a commercial environment where spills, splatters, and occasional bumps are part of the daily routine, the metal shell can take the abuse better than a plastic-cased competitor. The ETL listing adds a layer of confidence that the unit meets safety and sanitation standards, which is something you usually only see on equipment meant for food service. Now for the practical weaknesses that you'll notice once the box is opened. The first is the power requirement. A 240V plug isn't something you can just yank out of a standard 120V outlet, so you'll need an electrician to run a dedicated line or use a step-up transformer. That's an upfront cost that can catch people off guard. The second is the noise level. The high-powered fan that circulates air for convection can be louder than a typical countertop microwave, which may be noticeable in a quiet home kitchen or a small office break room. Finally, the sheer size can be a challenge. Even though it's a countertop model, it takes up roughly the same footprint as a standard 5-slice toaster oven, but it's much heavier and taller. If you're tight on space, you'll need to measure carefully and make sure there's clearance for the door to open fully. Let's put those strengths and weaknesses into a real-world scenario. Imagine you're prepping for a Sunday brunch for 20 guests. You want to serve baked cinnamon rolls, a vegetable frittata, roasted potatoes, and a fruit crumble. With a traditional home oven, you'd have to stagger the cooking times or compromise on temperature, risking uneven results. With the KoolMore, you can load each dish onto its own rack, set the temperature, and let the convection fan do the work. Because the oven maintains consistent heat across all 4 racks, the cinnamon rolls rise perfectly while the potatoes crisp up on a separate level. You end the cooking cycle with